I feel like if Wednesday read this, there would probably be some kind of eerie similarities. Lydia definitely feels like an outcast, and obviously Wednesday feels like an outcast as well. And I think Wednesday would be intrigued by some of the more grotesque metaphors. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm not gonna be able to be as serious as she is. I think of myself as somebody so stoic and all the things that Wednesday is, but I'm not gonna be able to make it through this video without laughing. What is up guys, welcome back to another video. I've been promising my Wednesday Addams video for a while now, and here it is. I'm really excited to get into some of these book recommendations. I grew up watching the Addams Family movies. I grew up watching like Beetlejuice. I'm so excited for Beetlejuice. The second one that's coming out in like September. I wasn't really a Disney girl. Like I didn't even see The Lion King until I was like in college. There are a couple of people here on YouTube who have already done like a deep dive into all of the literary references in the actual show. I will link those below. They were so good. So here is the stack. They all happen to be mostly black covers except for like one, which I think is kind of fitting. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. The first one that I'm going to recommend, I feel like it's kind of an obligatory dark academic one that I need to recommend just because the vibe is so similar. I listened to this one on audiobook, so I don't have the physical copy, but that is Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House. So other than it being like a creepy scholastic setting, which obviously fits the vibe of Wednesday, we also have a very snarky main character, Alex Stern, and she can see ghosts. That's kind of her whole thing. That's kind of what sets the plot in motion of Ninth House. And so we also see that happen with Wednesday in the show, where her ancestor Goody kind of appears to her in visions to warn her about some things that are happening at the school. Just like in Wednesday, Alex has to solve a mystery. And I feel like that is kind of Wednesday's whole thing, is she is very much intrigued by finding the truth and solving a mystery, and that's exactly what Alex has to do as well. There's obviously all sorts of supernatural phenomenon. There is also a sequel, so if you end up really liking it, Hellbent is the sequel. I think I have a whole reading vlog on Hellbent, just because I was so excited to, you know, dive back into that whole story. But if you have been sleeping under a rock and somehow have not read Ninth House, I do think it was worth the read. Next up, we have a vampire novel. I feel like you can't really come up with book recommendations that are like related to Wednesday without kind of knocking on a vampire's door. She is like such a little gremlin. She just looks like a little vampire. And so that is Woman Eating by Claire Coda for my next recommendation. I feel like the main characters, so Wednesday and then I forget her name. Oh, Lydia. That's really funny because Lydia, like from Beetlejuice.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Lydia is our protagonist in this book, and she has just broken away from her vampire mother. She wants to try to kind of strike out on her own and find her independence, and so she ends up at university, but she's surrounded by humans. So this is essentially her, it's kind of a slim novel as well. It's not too long, about 200 pages, but it's her kind of finding her way in the world and trying to see if she can actually survive on her own. Kind of like a coming of age novel, but she's sort of coming of age as a young vampire instead of just like a teenager or a young woman. Lydia's main issue, the main conflict, is sort of how is she going to eat? How is she going to survive? How is she going to provide for herself, because her mom has been doing that her whole life. Again, you have a dark academic setting, and then you have a young woman who's trying to find her way in the world. Lydia definitely feels like an outcast, and obviously Wednesday feels like an outcast as well. She doesn't want to be at the school. She for sure struggles to connect with others, and that is kind of Wednesday's big thing. In fact, it's kind of the arc of the whole, I mean, I won't ruin too much if you haven't seen the show, but it's kind of the arc of the whole season pretty much is like her learning how to trust other people and just make a friend. And so Lydia struggles with that too. It's just like, how do I make a friend? What does that mean? I feel like the themes were really similar. Next up, I have kind of just an author. I'm going to mention a couple of different things by her. Aaliyah Whiteley is one of my faves. She has written a book. The story that got me into her was a short story called The Beauty. Really incredible, very creepy, Super, super short, and it's more kind of like science fiction, I guess, but it just is so creepy. I feel like it's something Wednesday would enjoy. And essentially a womb ravishing disease has caused the death of all women, and so you're kind of following a very small band of men who are essentially going to be, you know, like the last men, the last humans to walk the planet. But from the graves, the mass graves of where they've buried all of the women, start sprouting these strange yellow mushrooms. And I don't want to say anything else. It's definitely very freaky. It's worth a read. Whether or not you are into like mushrooms and mycology or not, it's very disturbing. It had me gripped. I wish it was a whole novel. I would love a movie adaptation. It was so good. So the beauty is what originally got me into this author, but I do have a couple others on my shelf that I just grabbed that I can recommend as well. The Loosening Skin. So this is about a woman who, I think it's like every few years or something, everybody sheds their skin, and with it your memories go as well. So you kind of like literally become a new person every time you shed your skin. But this wonder drug comes on the market and it actually prevents the molt from happening. And so that's kind of what the plot sort of centers around. It's very interesting. It's a very different novel. And again, pretty short. She doesn't really write anything too long. It's about 250 pages. And then if you're more into short stories and you don't want to be attached to anything for too long, this is From the Neck Up and Other Stories. Just as weird, very speculative. Some of the reviews, the way they describe her stuff, they talk about how well Whiteley can sort of peel back the layers of everyday life and kind of highlight the strangeness. There are a couple of stories with monsters in here, which again relates to the Wednesday show, because obviously there's a big bad monster in Wednesday. If you like anything sort of subtly horror related, then you will like Aaliyah Whiteley. Next up is a book in which the main character really reminds me a lot of Wednesday. Super short, 200 pages, and that is Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. So our main character has some special abilities. She's a young woman, and she has these basically healing abilities. It's very much kind of secretive. There's a lot about this that you're gonna have questions about, and they aren't necessarily going to get answered. So our main character, Ada, and her father seem to have some sort of healing abilities, and it is suggested that they are not quite human, but we never really get a clear answer. It's never stated like, are they vampires? Are they werewolves? Are they, you know, they seem like they can sort of transform in some sort of way. You don't really know. So this book will leave you with honestly some more questions than answers. So if you don't like that, you might not like this book, but I really enjoyed it. Eventually a cute young boy comes along, and Ada does fall in love. His name is Samson. It kind of mirrors the story in Wednesday with her, well, actually two boys that she kind of has a thing for. Anyway, and she's just been kind of isolated, honestly, in a little village with her father for years. And so any new change that comes along, especially if it's a cute boy, definitely sparks her interest. Of course, her dad has to forbid the relationship, and so that causes some drama. And then there seems to be something wrong with Samson, and that's kind of why her dad is really suspicious of him. There seems to be something that's like not quite right, like he has a screw loose or something. And even though she and her dad are healers, whatever's wrong with Samson seems to be like something that's way outside of their control, their ability to heal. So in that sense, it's actually pretty similar to the Wednesday show storyline. I feel like if Wednesday read this, there would probably be some kind of eerie similarities that she would sort of see in her life and in, you know, the boy that she likes, and there being something off for sure, but she just doesn't know what. So anyway, that is Follow Me to Ground. Next up, we have a short story collection. This one I love so much. I love this author. She's one of my faves. I will definitely read anything that she writes. This is actually a translated work because she is from Argentina. This is a work of mostly like speculative fiction, and that is 19 Claws and a Blackbird. I am obsessed with this cover. I don't know exactly what it is about it, but I do love it so much. There were two or three stories that specifically reminded me of Wednesday because of the monster in the show. Especially, I think it was the very last story. I have tabs, I could probably check. If you pick this up and don't read anything else, the very last story in the back is called The Solitary Ones, and it was so spooky. I definitely got chills, and I feel like that's kind of hard to do, honestly. It's definitely like your Halloween night read. It was so good. I feel like it might even spook Wednesday, just a little bit. Essentially, the lights go out in the subway, and the main character is alone, and they end up just kind of like walking off into the darkness, and there's definitely something in the darkness with them. There's just some wacky, definitely like magical realism sort of elements in here. Like there's one that takes place in a cemetery. Like there's definitely some Wednesday vibes in here for sure. I think one of the things I love most about Badstarika is her ability to write a final line that just completely makes you rethink the actions and the thoughts of the main character. Like it literally will be one sentence that flips the entire story on its head. I don't know how she does that. That is like some unique literary prowess that I don't know that I will ever be able to touch. And she does that as well in here with a few of her stories. So recommend her. Then we have one of my absolute favorites. I'll mention both of them actually. It's currently a duology. I think it's supposed to be a trilogy at some point, but Vita Nostra is the first book, and then Assassin of Reality is the second, by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. I believe Sergei has passed away, so Marina will be writing the third book on her own, so it's not out yet, but I'll just talk about the first book. This is so interesting. If you are into dark academic stories, which obviously you might be if you were obsessed with Wednesday, we have a young main character. Her name is Sasha. And she's approached one day randomly by a guy who offers her this very interesting opportunity. Long story short, she finds herself in a very sort of arcane university, and the students there study some sort of, I don't even know exactly how you would describe it. It's kind of like a mixture between like quantum mechanics and magic. That's kind of what it feels like. It's a little bit hard to describe. It's very abstract. I remember specifically one of the descriptions because it's so unique. It's like she explains like doing the spells is like trying to untangle like a knot of barbed wire just with your mind. If that gives you any idea of like what this is kind of like. The place is called the Institute of Special Technologies, which is obviously still very vague and doesn't really give you any kind of like specific description of what is actually happening there, but in the blurb it says, the books are impossible to read, the lessons are obscure to the point of maddening, and the work refuses memorization. Using terror and coercion to keep the students in line, the school does not punish them directly for their transgressions. Instead, their families pay a terrible price. It is pretty intense, like a really fascinating read. This is another translated work. I believe it was originally published in Ukraine. It just has all the dark academic vibes that I love, and a main character who is kind of like duty bound to finding the truth, because again, Sasha has like so many questions, just like Wednesday does. I feel like Wednesday would see some of herself in Sasha because they're both very like headstrong. So this is another one that I really enjoyed. This for me, I think is like a 5-star. I love it so much. Getting close to the end here, my next recommendation is going to be pretty much anything by Mona Awad. I love her. I feel like she's kind of a divisive author just because of the way that she writes characters is... It can be, basically her novels can be really confusing sometimes because you're not totally sure exactly what is real and what is not. So Bunny is her really popular one. That's where you have a small little gaggle of girls and they're kind of dabbling in witchcraft and basically getting in over their heads, which is very similar to what Wednesday does. She's trying to like find the truth all by herself and definitely getting in way over her head. So that's the one that people are more familiar with. I recently listened to Rouge and I really liked that one as well. Same kind of vibe. You don't totally for sure know exactly what is real and what's not. This one's a little bit different. With Rouge, it's a young girl and her mother has recently passed, and something that she discovers that was always very secretive was that her mother was a part of some sort of group or institution that kind of ends up turning into more of a cult situation, and it has to do with skincare and weird jellyfish and creams, and I felt like it was a book that felt kind of like a trick mirror, like looking into a trick mirror, like you know something's off, but it's still you. She ends up seeing like Tom Cruise, like literal Tom Cruise in the mirror. And then she ends up like, the main character has like a relationship with him. Like he's there with her, but also you're like, this has gotta be just in her head, right? Like, I don't know, it gets very strange. It's comped to Eyes Wide Shut, the Tom Cruise film. So yeah, very weird. I don't know what Mona Awada is smoking, but whatever she puts down on the page is always very interesting. And then lastly, I have two by Jenny Haval. I think I'm saying her name right. She's a Norwegian author. And for my Reading Around the World challenge, I've been, reading books from different countries. I can link those videos in the cards if you guys have no idea what I'm talking about. The main one that I want to recommend is Paradise Rot. This one is so good. Super short, tiny little like novella of a book, less than 150 pages. It follows a main character who has just moved to university, and for whatever reason she can't live on campus. I don't know, for some reason she has to find a place to stay. And so the only place available in town is this warehouse. Like it used to be a warehouse where they made beer or something. And there's already a girl living there who's a little bit odd, but it's basically like her only option. So she moves in. And it's very creepy. This warehouse is like super run down. Honestly, probably not somewhere people even should be living. And the way that she uses sound metaphors, like food metaphors, is very interesting. I think I described in my, like when I was talking about this in my wrap-up video, I described it almost as if it was like an ASMR novel. Because all the descriptions of sound are just like so specific. You feel like it ends up being very like claustrophobic. And then lots of themes around like the female body and sensuality and queerness and fruit. Lots of fruit metaphors for the female body. So I'll just leave it there. But I found it very interesting, and I think Wednesday would be intrigued by some of the more grotesque metaphors. And then kind of going along with that, one I just finished by Jenny Haval was Girls Against God. I thought this would be a little bit different than it was. It wasn't really a traditional novel like I thought it was gonna be, because it says it's set in a small town in Norway. White Christian values run deep, and a teenage girl gives into the lure of rebellion offered by the upstart black metal scene. And it's less plot and character development and more just kind of like a way for Haval to kind of ruminate on some of her ideas about music. She's a musician, so there's a lot about like black metal as it existed in like the 90s and early 2000s in here. Just her opinions on the black metal scene, and again, queerness and the female body, a lot of basically all the same themes that she wrote about in Paradise Rot, but just in a slightly different form, I guess. It's very like cerebral, if that makes any sense. Lots of metaphors. It's more of a book where like an author is kind of pushing just their ideas out behind the thin veil of plots, than it actually being like a story with character development. So I feel like Wednesday might like this if she's just wanting something to kind of tickle her brain. Now I think that is everything. I think I mentioned all the things that I wanted to. You guys definitely leave your recommendations below as well. If you have any books that you think we should be reading in between seasons 1 and 2 that are similar to Wednesday, or any books that you think that she would actually like, I would be very interested in hearing what you have to say. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.